Hello and welcome to Culture in Between, a podcast all about exploring the unique and wonderful experiences of people who grew up in a culture outside of their parents' culture. We are your hosts, Alyssa and Brianna, and today we have the pleasure of interviewing Alex, who has Lebanese and Jamaican roots. Alex, thank you so much for joining us on the show. We really look forward to speaking with you.
So Alex and I went to high school together. Fast forward a few years, went to graduate school together, actually. And we were roommates for a year while we were in graduate school as well. So yeah, we have a long history together. So I'm so excited to have my dear friend Alex on the podcast. So Alex, can you just briefly introduce yourself?
Sure. Like you both, I was born in Miami. My daddy's from Lebanon. My mom is Lebanese family, but born in Jamaica. I have two sisters, grew up in a very, very hybridized household. But let's see. So yeah, I went to high school with Brianna at New World School of the Arts. I was, which a lot of people don't know, in the vocal program, but I ended up not pursuing vocal arts in any way. And then I attended the Peabody Conservatory at Johns Hopkins University, where I did my undergraduate in violin performance. And then Brianna joined me, where we both did our master's degrees, she in vocal performance and I in violin performance, as well as musicology. So I was a violinist, still am, and now I'm going into the fifth year of my PhD in musicology and ethnomusicology at Brown University in Providence. Yeah, I'm in between Boston and Providence, loving the New England life.
Nice.
Yeah, wonderful.
Multi-talented musician.
Multi-talented, multi-degrees. Yeah.
Multi-struggling.
Right? That too. That just comes with it. Yeah. My mom, as Jamaican mothers do, and maybe we'll get into this later, my mom always asks for Alex randomly because Jamaican mothers love to ask about your friends that they know about at random times.
My mom does the same thing.
Yes. It's the Jamaican way. And and one of the things she's like, him still in school? And I'm like, yeah, he's still in school and he's very happy with his cats. And So yes. Yes. Thank you so much for introducing yourself. So we're going to jump right in and ask the I think the juiciest question, or this is one that I'm really excited to ask you about. It's probably not that juicy. I don't know. I'm really interested to know whether you feel closer to your Lebanese heritage or whether you feel closer to your Jamaican heritage.
That is a fabulous question. I've always felt I have a very complicated relationship with my Lebanese side for a number of reasons. Lebanese culture, it's beautiful, right? Like it's extremely old. The history itself is really, really fascinating. And in that way, I do feel some kind of relationship to it. But it's not, at least my experience of it. And I want to preface this by saying that I do think that this is specific to an immigrant phenomenon that where people leave the homeland or the old country, and what they left is what stays in their mind for decades. Even though the country evolves, it changes. They have a very sort of not frozen in time, but kind of frozen in time idea of what it was like. So I always felt like I grew up with a very dated, old school understanding of what Lebanese culture is. And I didn't love that. So to be totally honest, I think growing up, I felt more affinity with the Caribbean, more affinity. And that is also by virtue of living in Miami, where I wasn't necessarily surrounded by Lebanese immigrants. I was surrounded by, Jamaican immigrants, Cubans, and generally just the island culture, if you can even say that there is one, felt like it was much more part of my upbringing.
Yeah, and that was going to be another one of my questions is so did you feel very connected to the Jamaican culture in Miami? Because we grew up on opposite sides of Miami, I should say. Even though we went to the same high school, it was kind of like a special arts high school. So everyone lived like an hour away. So we grew up actually on completely different sides of the city. And like all the Jamaican people I knew lived on the south side.
Yes,
so I'm just wondering if you still felt very connected to the Jamaican community in Miami.
I didn't actually, because I grew up in Aventura. So I think, which is predominantly, as I understand it, predominantly a Jewish neighborhood in Aventura. At least it was when I was growing up. I think now it's got everything. But But, I think my connection to Jamaica wasn't so much to the community in Miami as much as it was the proximity to the island. So Jamaica was somewhere I went every year, sometimes more than once a year. I have only been to Lebanon twice in my life. And I was generally closer to my mom's side of the family. So like my mom's sister, when we grew up, she lived in Broward, so which is, even further north than Aventura. So we would spend a lot of time with her and her kids. And I was just sort of much closer to my mom's side of the family. So it was, I guess, the affinity to the Jamaican culture was more familial than it was necessarily part of the expat community in Miami.
Yeah. And you actually answered my next question, which was how many times or have you visited your home countries or your parents' home countries? So now that you already mentioned that you have visited both countries, can you tell me what your experience was like visiting Jamaica and Lebanon?
Yeah, this gets complicated because, and this is a hard position to occupy as a non-Black person of color in Jamaica. So the reason why, I guess I should give some background. The reason why my mom was born in Jamaica is because there actually is quite a big Arab community not just in Jamaica, but also in Haiti, which is where my mom's mother was born. So there is a large sum of Arabs who left, I want to say Lebanon, Syria, Palestine and moved. But as I understand it, the history is not savory, right? Like my grandparents and great grandparents, they pretty much exploited resources. They exploited their sort of position as light-skinned people of color in islands that were very sort of coloristic. So going there has always been it's always been fun, but especially in the last decade, I become acutely aware of, the fact that my ancestors really did not necessarily add to the island as much as they took from it. So going back now is more complicated in that respect because I can feel that, okay, there was a time where my family, they were outsiders in this community, but what they did is they exploited their positions of power. And instead of using that power to kind of give back to a new country that was not theirs to begin with, not that any country belongs to anybody, but instead of doing that, they built their own wealth and they used that power to build wealth. So my mom grew up in a lot of wealth in Jamaica. She was, went to boarding school in France. My mom, to really wealthy family, and my mom's family, as much as I love them and they're wonderful, they didn't always understand their position in that environment. So it was work that my sisters and I had to do to kind of counteract the kind of entitlement that comes with effectively being white in Jamaica. So in the US, Arabs are not white, but in Jamaica, they pretty much are. Sorry, that was totally a tangent.
No, it's fine.
I think you brought up a really great point, Alex. Like, I think you said it's non-Black person of color, which I thought was a very interesting way to phrase it. But, and I think for our listeners, like a lot of people don't realize that Jamaicans are mixed with so many different things. They aren't just Black, I think majority of the population is, but like our parents being, or our mom being Chinese Jamaican, and we have like white race grandparents or like deep in there. So like a lot of people don't realize that. So I think you just mentioning that is very interesting for people listening because people don't realize that Jamaica, because I feel like when people think of Jamaica, they tend to think like certain things and they don't really realize.
Bolt and Bob Marley.
But like it's a very diverse, what is this slang again?
Out of many, one people.
Right.
Yes.
And so that's very interesting to hear kind of your side of that.
I think it's interesting because my research is on music in Cuba, and the reason I bring that up is because I often have to address the fact that actually race is understood in very different terms in Cuba than it is in the U.S., whereas the U.S. is still stuck in a very black-white binary, as I'm sure you both know. In Jamaica, it's more. That's what I was trying. I think I said coloristic in the fact that it's more the shade of color that you are, literally the shade of your skin. sort of, not just whether you're Black or you're white, but are you light skinned? Are you, and that often is what comes to condition a lot of the power of relations in the islands. So people don't realize that it's not just, people in the US just don't always understand that it's much more understood as a spectrum especially in the Caribbean, I think.
Yeah, it's so much more nuanced. And I remember when we went there, one of the times we've been to Jamaica, one of our drivers telling us how he's like, oh yeah, everyone in Jamaica wants to have your color of skin because my sister and I are kind of lighter skin. Like we said, our mother is Chinese Jamaican and she's Chinese presenting really. So and it just and he just went on to talk about how people use skin lightening creams and all these things, and it was just so disheartening. I mean, I knew that was a thing there, but it's so disheartening to hear that. But I think, like you said, it's just there's the coloristic society there. And we're going to get into kind of race and that white,
Brianna
Black,
keeps us on point.
binary.
Sure,
I'm trying to be respectful of people's
I kind of just riff.
I'm trying to be, I'm the one with all the questions.
It's a good balance.
Yeah. But and I don't want to miss this because I want to go in a good structure.
Sure.
We talked about your experience in Jamaica, and you have much more experience going to Jamaica. But what was your experience like visiting Lebanon?
Yeah, visiting Lebanon was really. So I went twice. Once when I was 8, and the more recently when I was, I want to say 24, was in 2018. Yeah, it felt. I had the experience of being like, oh my goodness, everybody here looks like me. That was sort of the first time I sort of had that experience where I didn't quite realize that existed, that there was this sort of place where I could go and say, oh my goodness, like I see now why I look the way I do. It's a beautiful country. I felt more like a tourist than I did like going to Jamaica and always has had the feeling of, oh, I'm going home. But Lebanon has felt more like I am going as a tourist. So it did way more sort of tourist attractions. I don't speak the language. I don't speak Arabic. So that is a huge barrier. And we can get into that as to why I don't speak Arabic.
Yeah, we will.
So it's felt more like, going to see the sights and being so taken by all the sights and, just sort of immersing in the history, immersing in the culture. And in many ways I felt more foreign to the culture. And like I was having to learn stuff about Lebanon that I didn't know.
Yeah. Do you still have family there? Like, did you stay with your family when you went there? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my grandmother, who has since passed, we would stay with her. And I have, oh my God. So my dad grew up in a very sort of financially very modestly in a village, pretty much in a mountain village. And that village, I think nearly at least half of the people who live in that village have the same last name that I do. So it's a very sort of tight-knit community. They were all very excited. Every time we would go, it's like the whole village would descend upon this tiny little stone house that my dad grew up in. It was overwhelming. Yeah. And I've never felt like more of an American than when I was in Lebanon. I was like, I need my space. I want everyone to get away from me. I need my own bathroom. I felt the American in me when I was in Lebanon for sure. Yeah.
It's an interesting juxtaposition where like you went there and you're like, everyone looks like me. Like, yet you feel so like I don't belong, which is such an interesting.
Absolutely. And I'll bring this up just in case, I don't know if this is something you do want to bring up ultimately, Brianna, but neither Lebanese nor Jamaican culture take kindly to non-normative sexualities. So that has been another kind of another barrier to feeling close to my either side, is that I would hear growing up, my uncles make extremely offensive jokes on both sides, actually. My dad's brothers and my mom's brothers were really cavalier about their homophobia. So that and then also hearing about in Jamaica about a gay man being beat to death by police and the similar things happening in Lebanon. So it's that's something we could definitely talk more about as to why sort of the not feeling like I belong was in Lebanon. I have felt that acutely.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So maybe let's get into so many things to get into. I don't even know where. Okay. Let's go.
Alex, she's been so excited about this. She's
I
like,
know,
oh my
because
gosh.
it's so-
I never get to talk
yeah.
about this. I literally never get to talk about this.
Yeah, that's
So-
why I wanted to get into this. And also, I'm glad you brought up the whole like non-heteronormative feelings in both countries because, I wasn't even sure if I should have asked that, but I wasn't even sure if you were willing to talk about that because I just remember like, all throughout high school, like, you were like closeted.
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
even after that, like you still hadn't really told your dad. So I was always
I still
like, okay.
haven't. And I don't, but I'm at the stage now where like, I don't really care. And my decision not to tell him gay people exist or queer people exist in both countries,
Yes.
Right.
just as much as they do any other country. But, it's not unusual, or I should say it's quite common for gay men just never to tell their dads in Lebanon. Like it's just like it's heard about. I've had gay cousins who their parents died before they came out to them, even though their parents knew. So it's not even at this point about not being afraid to tell him, and more that this feels like this is what it's become. Like this is the norm. But yeah, I don't mind talking about it. We can talk about it at length. I have no problem about that at all. Yeah,
okay, yeah, no,
this is.
I think it's interesting that I find that Bran and I being, I don't know, something we found is that I'm a more emotional person, and I find that Jamaicans can tend to be very like if you don't quite fit the mold, some type of mold of like being happy all the time or this or whatever, it's just kind of like, oh, like just buck up, kind of like, just deal, like life is hard, just kind of deal with it, whatever. And so like, I know it's not exactly similar to what you were discussing, but I just find that like, I haven't, sometimes like, oh man, like how would I have survived in a Jamaican culture where like my feeling depressed or being anxious is almost like, what are you doing wrong to feel that way?
Yeah.
Like I just felt like that.
Yeah, like my mom always used to just say, lively up yourself. And I was always like, what are you saying? And like, it wasn't until later that I realized that was a Bob Marley song.
Oh, is it?
I was like, she couldn't even choose an original, like, which we might talk about that because
Bob Marley and Bible quotes.
Bob Marley and Bible quotes.
Because Alex knows mom, right? Alex,
yeah, he knows.
You've been around my mother.
He's been around her a fair amount.
Yeah. She stayed in the apartment with us.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that was such a disaster.
The opera, right?
It was that apartment was too small for 4 people.
Yes.
It was so
yes. Oh my God. I have good memories of that weekend though.
I know.
So you know Juliet then in her, crazy ways.
Yeah. Oh, I do.
So anyway, we've gone a little bit off the rails
please bring us back.
I'm gonna reel us back in. I'm gonna reel us back in.
Do it.
So maybe let's go into race a little bit now.
Sure.
So that's my other juicy question that I would really like to know is, so at least for Alyssa and I, as we said, being Chinese Jamaican and having a white grandmother with red hair on my dad's side and all this, mixture. When we have to fill out those forms that have all those boxes that have different races and you have to choose one. So for our non-American listeners, this is just commonplace in the US. From when you're very young, every time you take a standardized test, you have to choose from a list of races before you start your test and choose what race you are. And let me tell you, low-level anxiety every time I have to decide.
Oh my God.
I don't know if I'm other or I'm mixed or I'm black.
Sometimes they don't even have those options.
Sometimes, that's true.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes you can like write it in, and I'm like, should I write something in? What do I even write in? I don't know.
Yeah.
So I want to know, what do you choose when you have to choose a box?
Boy. Okay. So, oh my God, I'm so happy you asked this question. So growing up, I always understood myself to be white. My parents kind of believed that too. My mom more than my dad. So I always, but I was white. That was something I never questioned as a child, and taking all the FCAT exams. Remember those?
Yes.
And, and all the standardized tests, the SAT, applying to college. It was only when I moved to Baltimore that people started to look at me differently. And I think this is another specific Miami thing where it's such a hodgepodge of so much that it almost feels like there's a little bit of everything in Miami. But in Baltimore, I went to a conservatory where most people were either white or East Asian. That was just like the if you look at the demographic and if you look at if you break it down, it was, I want to say 33. I remember at the time looking at these statistics, it was 33% East Asian and something like, I want to say something like 50% white. So anyway, which is to say that I moved to Baltimore and people didn't look at me the same way. It was not, something had shifted. And I thought like, okay, I'm not feeling the way I did when I was in Miami. And I would have conversations with other people. And it wasn't until later in my time in Baltimore, even throughout my time in Baltimore, I still clung to that. Like, yes, I'm white. I'm still white. I'm still white. And it wasn't until, I want to say it was my violin teacher at Peabody that finally was like, Alex, you're not white, you're brown. And I was like, what? That's not a category. I've never seen that category written down. Like, that's not an option.
Show me where that is on the list.
Exactly. Like, let me pull up the census. Like, that's not on the census. And she meant it in a good way. She didn't mean it in a demeaning way. She just meant it in like a lot is implied by me identifying as white. And things that I might not want to suggest or imply about myself in saying that I'm white. So she's the one who started to get me thinking. And then, of course, I started hopping on the TikTok and Instagram trends, and I got on Arab TikTok and Arab Instagram, and I started to see other Arabs who were like, yeah, has anybody else been told they're white their whole life? And then suddenly like come to realize that, wait a minute, they don't look at us the same way they look at white people with the last name Smith. Mm-hmm. So it was, I want to say it was when I applied to grad school. Well, when I applied to grad school the second time. So when I applied to PhD programs, that I started to be uncomfortable selecting white. That was the first time where I was like, oh my goodness, there are words to describe this feeling of not quite belonging, not necessarily being rejected by those in power, but not quite belonging the way that others do. And I started to realize, okay, there are words to articulate this. And by suggesting that I'm white, by clicking white, I'm actually ignoring all of that. And I'm associating myself with a level of privilege that I actually don't have. I do benefit from white privilege. I mean, no doubt about that, but not to the degree that very fair-skinned people do with different features. Mm-hmm. So so I want to say more recently, I have started to either say other and even not even fill it in, not write it in, or put Arab. I'll put other and Arab. And funny, nobody questions that. As soon as you say, I'm not white, I'm an Arab, they're like, oh yeah, you're not white. Yeah, you're right. Just a little side note here. And this is relevant. This is not me being offering a shameless plug.
We've gone into a swervy lane already. It's okay.
I promise it's relevant. So I'm part of, quite possibly the nerdiest thing I will say, I'm part of the American Musicological Society, which is this big organization.
AMA.
AMS.
AMS, okay.
Yeah, AMS. Which if you Google, it takes you to the American Meteorological Society. It's not that one.
Wow.
Anyway.
Also nerdy.
Right? But they offer a scholarship every year, a fellowship that for grad students, but specifically for people of color. They have a list of identities that are eligible for this fellowship: Black, Asian, East Asian, South Asian, Indigenous, Latinx, no Middle Eastern. And then there's like a more info. There's like a little page you can click more info to see what they have, like an explanation for how they come up with those categories and how they use the U.S. Census as the guidelines that the U.S. Census has created, the U.S. Census Bureau. And in the U.S. Census Bureau, it specifically states that Middle Easterns must select white on the U.S. Census. That it is we have to. So I didn't think I was eligible for the scholarship. And then other people who had previously received it were like, no, you should absolutely apply. And I felt really conflicted at first. I was back and forth for a while about like, this is strange. Like I'm applying to something that doesn't explicitly include me, but I think that that's a problem. So which is to say that I still struggle with how to identify, both personally and institutionally, because those are not always the same thing.
I think Alyssa and I can totally relate to that.
Yeah.
Even though obviously we look much different from you, but
No, it's a similar.
yeah, it's a similar thing. It's of not really knowing where you fit in, and I think America is such a racialized culture, and that like you said, from a young age, you're asked to choose your race and pick a box, and you're stuck in that box, and there's the one drop rule where if you're just one drop of black, you're considered black all the way. So it's such a confusing thing.
And sometimes I just check whatever. Like I was like, I just check the pun intended black box today because it's just it's just easier, and it's just when you don't want to describe it to people, it's just like it's black, whatever. But like people have nuances and things, and it's surprising how something so simple sounding is like can cause some anxiety on like, okay, what do I check? For my race, because I see what you're saying, like when you're just checking white and how your teacher was like, oh, but you're brown. It's like, well, because it's almost like you're a little bit, because you have this all this like history and nuance behind you, and so that's I can see how that would be conflicting.
And it's because the truth is that the three of us, we've all had very different experiences and backgrounds, but like we have not had the experience that white people have had growing up in the U.S. Like there's no doubt about it that people, I think, in this country, and I'm sure in other countries, but specifically in the US, look at us and automatically make a lot of decisions about who we are. That the same doesn't happen to people who are fair-skinned white or who present as fair-skinned white. So, and I think to kind of institutionally identify as white ignores that experience entirely, and it does a disservice, I think, to us. It doesn't create a space to actually demand that experience be accounted for.
I found to kind of combat some of that. I had a lot of, I feel like cultural identity issues growing up. I don't feel like you did as much as maybe.
That's interesting.
I don't know.
Maybe I should interview you.
Well, I don't know, because people would ask, like, you see your parents, and I'm just like, okay, I don't think anything of it. And then people are like, why is your mom so much fairer? Like, people ask me if I was adopted, and I did not understand, like, what are you? And I was like, what do you mean I'm Alyssa? Like, I did, when you're like 7 and young, like you're not, I'm like, but then you kind of put 2 and 2 together, like, okay, how I look makes me seem different. And so I was like, well, this person says I'm not really black because I don't act this way, or this person says no, but you are. So I just found like to find solace in it is that's like, okay, everyone's going to have a different opinion depending on their experiences and upbringing. And I just like, I know I have confidence in like what I am and what I know, what my upbringing, and it doesn't really matter what people kind of see, because that, or else I was like just flip-flopping all over the place because I was gauging it off of like, well, what does this person say about me? This contradicts what this other person says. So that's how I've kind of found, I don't know, solace in some of it.
Lean into to not feeling legible. You know what I mean?
And can I also just say, I don't know if you feel this with your mom as well, but like my mom, I feel like Jamaican people in general, because it was such a multicultural society, multiracial society, especially back in when our parents were there, they like just don't understand the idea of having to like choose one. Like I remember talking to my mom about it one time, and she was like, I was like, okay, Mom, what do you feel you are? Like, what do you say to people? She's like, well, as long as I know who I am, that's all that matters. And I'm like, what? Well, can you tell me what I am? Because people want to know. So it's like, I just feel like they like, you can't even really go to your parents for help with it when they're Jamaican, at least, because they just have no concept of like, you have to like choose one thing.
She said they had more like class almost.
Yes,
like
that's what my mom said too. Yeah,
okay,
that's exactly what my mom said, that it was not so much an issue of like skin color was not the single factor that determined your position in that society. That a lot of it was class based. But then you could also argue that the class was tended to fall along. But anyway, my mom has had similar things about class.
Interesting. Okay. What part of Jamaica did your mom grow up?
I didn't even know.
So my mom was born in Kingston.
Kingston, okay.
That's where my grandma still lives. That's where my uncle lives. Yeah, Kingston, always Kingston.
Cool. Nice, the capital. Our dad grew up there. Oh,
yeah?
Yeah, he moved there. He wasn't born there. But
he technically was born in St. Catherine, but he grew up in Kingston most of his life. Yeah.
Okay. That's great that you get to go so regularly, though. We haven't. We've gone sporadically over the years.
I haven't gone since 2018. Because summer of 2019 I was working, and then summer of 2020 and needs no explanation.
Yeah.
And I haven't been back since. But before that, it was pretty regular. I felt really lucky.
Yeah, I feel like we're leaving out your dad's side. So, and what part of Lebanon is your dad from?
No, it's okay. My dad is from. So there are two names for it: Byblos and Jebel. It's the same thing. I don't know why they have two names, but those are So it's about an hour from Beirut, about an hour and a half from Beirut.
So going back to the race conversation, because there was another question that I want to get into, and I have a little bit of a backstory also with us, is that, at least with me, I had a similar situation. When I moved outside of Miami, everyone started to think I was Hispanic. And when I was in Miami, I never experienced that. No one thought I was Hispanic. I don't think anyone knew what I was. But then when I moved outside of Miami, everyone just started speaking Spanish to me. They just assumed I was Hispanic. So I guess my question for you is, did people ask you, or do people ask you where you are from?
All the time.
And and how do you respond, and how do you feel about that question as well? Because some people really hate it, but I personally, like myself, I don't really mind it, actually.
Yeah.
So how do you feel?
I get asked all the time. I don't mind it at all. Actually, I think most of the time, look, like, I recognize that I'm not always legible in the way that, according to the grammar of American identity. I recognize that. So I think a lot of people are curious, and they just want to know, like, where is it that people look like you? You know what I mean? And I think that's the question that they're actually asking, is like, I'm pulling up all of the identities that I'm familiar with, and you're not matching any of them. So, where is it that you come from where people look like you? So I actually don't mind that question at all, at least in the ways that it's been asked. And I often clarify, like, do you mean where was I born or my ethnicity? And it's usually what follows is, both. So I'll tell them, like, I'm a Lebanese born in Miami, and then there's always like, it clicks. but yeah, I get asked that all the time. I guess there are, and I don't want to invalidate that there are more kind of condescending reasons why somebody might ask that. And I don't want to kind of negate that can be very, very true and offensive. I just have not experienced it as particularly triggering.
Same here. It used to bother me when I was younger, when I was going through my cultural identity issues. But then I was kind of like, people are just curious. Yeah, I think, and it's just fine. Usually, it's a very harmless question, and I think they just want to know. I don't think I've ever felt compelled to be like, I'm from America, I'm from Miami,
right?
And like I'm because I don't know. I get it. I get it.
Yeah. I really, if anything, I'm actually happy to be able to kind of try and explain myself a little bit. Because it's just, I know that it's confusing. It's confusing to myself. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to kind of be like, okay, this is what it is. Yeah, and absolutely. I am who I am, as my mother says. So, of course. So we've talked quite a bit about, I feel like, about the Jamaican side, but I have a question about Lebanon and kind of your Lebanese heritage, because a lot of people, at least in the U.S., probably don't know very much about Lebanon. And I think before I met you, I didn't really know that much about it, to be honest, either. But I feel like every time now I've seen like a news story about it, I'm like, that's where Alex is from, and now I want to know more. So if you have been following the news on Lebanon, in recent years, the country has fallen on quite hard times.
There's a lot apart is what's happening.
Yeah, there's a lot of political and economic turmoil. There was a very devastating explosion that was partially caused by some political inaction as well. So my question is just, how has the situation in Lebanon affected your family and maybe affected you personally as well?
Yeah, it's funny with the explosion. My grandma was dying of cancer that summer. She died on August 17th, I believe. And the explosion happened, I think, the week before. I think it was early August. Anyway, my dad was literally at the airport boarding a flight to Beirut as it happened. And it was the day. It was and COVID was spiking again. I think that was the summer of the, no, that wasn't the Delta variant. We were still in the earlier versions. Lebanon, it's heartbreaking actually to see. And even though I don't personally have an effective attachment to Lebanon in the way that my dad does, it's still very, very heartbreaking to watch, because what it's done to my dad is it's further severed him from the dream of eventually going back. I think my dad, and this is where I love my dad dearly. I have many issues with my dad, but I do love him dearly. And growing up and kind of getting a better understanding for my dad's experience as an immigrant from Lebanon, specifically from Lebanon, has I don't know, given me a lot more compassion for him, because he moved to Miami when he was, I think, 16 years old with hardly any money. I mean, not if any at all. Went back when he was 20. My dad's dad died when he was 20. My dad was 20 when his dad died, and came to the US because that's what people who wanted opportunities did. And it wasn't a choice that he particularly liked. It wasn't something he wanted to have to do, but he did it. And so did my dad's brothers. So did my dad's sister. They all came to the US. But my dad especially really resisted calling the US his home, because the US has a lot to do with why Lebanon has had a very tumultuous political and economic history. So my dad was not a happy person. He is not a happy person. And I really hated him for it when I was a kid, because I could not understand why my dad was such a miserable, unhappy person. And it's only now that I sort of look back and see that, my gosh, my dad pays tax dollars. His tax dollars literally go toward the demolition of the country he used to call home. And I think that is something that a lot of Lebanese immigrants in the US talk about, the experience of feeling beholden to the US because they are the ones pulling the puppet strings and they have no choice. So my dad has really resisted calling the US home, and it's always felt like he had one foot out the door. And the explosion, the economic collapse, it really sort of was like the nail in the coffin that his dream of returning, even though he left like 40 years ago, it's not going to happen. At least that's how I have understood it. And it's been really sad to watch, for him to really kind of watch that dream die. It's been heartbreaking.
Very reflective of you, though, to think, like, to see that from his perspective, because we have qualms with our parents and things, like, love them dearly as well. But like, there's definitely things as I've gotten older, I've noticed, like, okay, your upbringing, how you were raised, like that has really affected how you're raising me. And like, and we take out things that, like, okay. And so even though sometimes things are frustrating and like, why can't you see it my way? And you can have an empathy towards, I see why you react this way. You know, if this is how you're brought up, and with your dad missing home, I can, you can understand why he would feel upset or be angry. It
certainly doesn't. It doesn't change anything, but it adds a new sort of perspective that just kind of forces you to feel compassion rather than bitterness or resentment. It really, like, the last few years since the explosion have allowed me to see my dad very differently.
We're getting deep.
We are getting deep. I think we need to lighten it up.
Okay. All right. The moderator says we're getting too deep.
We're going to lighten it up. We're going to go So we're going to go to our, like, more broad cultural section here now.
Sure.
So can you tell us, what are some of your favorite Jamaican foods and what are some of your favorite Lebanese foods?
Sure. All right. I am a sucker for ackee.
Really?
I love ackee. Yeah, I really do.
See, he's a true Jamaican.
He's a true Jamaican.
My parents always say, "You're not a real Jamaican. You don't like ackee and saltfish." And I'm like,
I love it.
Yeah, but to be fair, Mom didn't like ackee for a while.
Oh, she didn't? Really?
Yeah, it's not until when she got older she started.
For people who don't know, ackee is the national fruit, right, of Jamaica, and it is I don't know how to even describe how it looks, but you need to Google it. But
it looks like scrambled eggs. Like once it's cooked, it looks like scrambled eggs.
Yes,
it really does.
And it is a poisonous fruit until it has blossomed and opened. So it is. There you go. There's an image for people who don't know.
Yeah.
So, sorry,
no,
Allison,
I love it. I absolutely love it with saltfish. And as a kid, sometimes I would eat it with bacon too, ackee and bacon with like the little bacon bits, and that was God, I love it. I absolutely love it. Of course, I love anything jerk. So
Sure.
except pork, I'm not a big jerk pork fan, but
Yeah, me
I mean
either.
jerk chicken is I mean,
Like it spicy or
I do. Even though my tolerance for spice is not very high, something about jerk chicken, I can't eat it unless it is really spicy.
Okay,
cool. I don't know. It's like I love it. We used to eat it as kids with what do you call it? Festival?
Yes.
Love it.
Oh my God.
We're making him hungry.
Yeah. Oh no, I love. I mean, of course, patties.
Yeah.
Can't go wrong with a good
Yes.
patties from in where we would get them from a place called. Oh my God, it's so funny that these are the names. There was the tasty patties.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're still there.
And juicy patties.
Juicy.
Yeah, there's like a competition between the two.
Yes, and then Mother's was the other one. Where
I'm not familiar.
I've heard of that.
So Mother's was like a fast food. It is like a fast food restaurant that also does patties.
Okay.
So those were the three we would go to, and I absolutely love the beef patties. The beef patties are my favorite. Oh gosh, so that's my Jamaican indulgence. Lebanese food. Oh my God. Oh God, Lebanese food's so good. So there's this one dish that's called kibbe. I don't know if you're familiar with it. So it's pretty much ground beef that's mixed with, I want to say it's barley, that's also seasoned with salt, pepper, allspice, and it's usually then fried. But the Lebanese, which is the way the Lebanese really enjoy eating it, is raw, which I know a lot of people are just like, what are you doing? But I absolutely love it. It is one of my favorite dishes. You just eat it with olive oil, bread. It is amazing. The other thing, I love stuffed grape leaves. I absolutely love stuffed grape leaves. So it's usually stuffed with rice and ground beef, which is seasoned with a whole bunch of stuff. And then it's wrapped in a grape leaf. And then you need a lot of butter to make it taste really good. What other Lebanese foods do I love? There is a chicken and rice dish that is usually only home cooked. It's not typically something you'd order at a restaurant, but it's pretty simple, but it's boiled chicken that's seasoned in salt, pepper, cinnamon, and brown sugar. Then it's browned and then boiled, and then the broth you use to cook the rice, and then you eat it all together. It's spectacular.
Were you able to get a lot of Lebanese food in Miami, actually?
Yes. So my mom cooked a lot of it. My mom cooked a lot of Lebanese food. So did my grandma. And there were many Lebanese restaurants. Well, I shouldn't say many. There were maybe a handful that we would go to that we quite liked.
One of the great parts growing up in Miami in a melting pot is that you can kind of get all these different cuisines.
You could sample so much.
Yeah, for sure.
That's so interesting. So it's your mom who used to make the
my dad can't boil water.
Well, okay, yeah, okay, all right. That's fair. Yeah. Same with our
really
dad.
Cannot.
Yeah.
It's my mom is the one who did all the cooking, but it's interesting because like in Jamaica, all of the Lebanese families or the Middle Eastern families, they all cook Middle Eastern food. It tastes different from what you have in Lebanon. But yeah, so they're always cooking up something in Jamaica that's Lebanese.
So the next one is an interesting one for me as well, because I'm interested to hear what your response is, because I feel like there are a ton of really great Jamaican sayings. And so my question is, what is your favorite Jamaican saying, and what is your favorite Lebanese expression as well?
Oh my gosh, that is a tough one.
Yeah, that is tough.
Yeah.
I ask the hard questions here.
Yeah, you do. I have to think.
Or maybe sayings that like his mom would say at home.
Yeah, if there's anything that your mom used to say. Yeah.
I can definitely tell you the Lebanese sayings that I really like. Like there's a word in Arabic that there is no equivalent in English, and it's khalas, which means it kind of means like enough, like we've done enough. Okay, like, no more. But it doesn't quite mean that, because it can be used in like a no, don't worry, it's okay, like no more, you don't have to keep going. Like it can also be used sort of in a more endearing way, and it's a fantastic word. Yalla is another one in Arabic that means like, all right, let's go. All right, so like whenever like you're deciding on where to eat, and if you're going out with several people and you decide on a restaurant and you're like, okay, this is where we're going, yalla, and then that means just like, okay, I'm gonna go. So those are the ones that come to mind immediately. There are a couple of others that are pretty derogatory and in Arabic that are and rather profane.
Okay, all right.
But I'm trying to think of the Jamaican ones.
Not
Tell
everybody's
me
parents read
some that
pro-
you've
Yeah.
that
Okay,
you've
yeah, I was
heard.
about to say, I was about to give you some examples.
I think because our mom, we always
Our
kind of
mom
joke.
is full of sayings.
It's like Jamaica, like Bible quotes and Bob Marley. Like those are like the
Yeah.
things.
And she doesn't
See,
say
my mom
like,
was not. My mom was
Okay.
not. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, not everyone's like so.
Well, that's just asking the question.
No,
Yeah.
but it's a
What
good
a-
question.
One example is that like so when my mom was like really, she worked a long shift at the hospital and was tired, and like say she had promised to take us to the mall or something, she would be like, "Lord, my body come down," and she was and she'd be like, "The heart is willing, but the flesh is weak." Like, so all those kind of things, she would just be like, just silly things like that.
Yeah.
Some of those, like the heart is willing and the flesh is weak. That is definitely like a Bible quote that she just misquotes all the
Yes,
time and puts in the wrong context.
wrong
So that's not even a
context, yeah.
Jamaican saying. That's
No.
just
Sure.
although
Sure.
Jamaican people do love to quote the Bible like all the time.
Sure. Yeah. Oh,
Speaking
yeah.
of which, speaking of just Jamaican sayings, this reminded me. Do you know about Julie Mango?
No.
We need to share that with her.
Okay,
Yes.
after this interview, we need to share.
Yeah.
She is a Jamaican TikToker.
Oh my God.
Who,
please.
who
But you don't have to be on TikTok because we're
we're not. I watched all her videos on YouTube.
Sure. Okay.
But she has. I mean, she has videos of Jamaican sayings, just funny stuff Jamaican moms do, and Jamaican
my God, I need
people
to see
do.
that. Yeah.
And she's Jamaican herself, so it's not like
Uh-huh.
she's making fun of.
Sure.
But
It's tasteful.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So my mom has a ton. One of my favorites that's actually like a Jamaican saying is actually when they meet someone and they kind of like don't know how they feel about them. They'd be like, "Oh, my spirit just na take a like they just like it's just like in their spirit, like because people are always very spiritual. It's like just in their spirit, they just don't know how they feel about this person, and I don't know, I love that.
That's a good one. Yeah, no, they're so expressive. Like you.
Yes.
So you know exactly what it.
Yes, they don't sugarcoat. That is one thing about I will say. Sometimes I will say it's a little hurtful. Like they don't mean malice most of the time, but like they will tell you if my mom hasn't seen me in a while and she thinks I'm fat, she will straight up like you put on weight. Like all these like they don't know.
My grandma. We would famously make fun of her for this. All of the grandkids, because she would see you and she'd say, "What a way you got so fat."
Oh my god!
So my grandma speaks with the Jamaican accent, like very much so. A cross between Haiti and Jamaica. Like it's a weird kind of. But that's the one thing she would say, and she would mean it lovingly. But we were all like, "Gosh!" Like,
my grandma did that to me too. I hadn't seen her in like 10 years too, and that was like one of the first things that came out of her mouth.
Yes, no, that's probably the worst thing that they say. But like you said, it's
there's a novelty to it because like you know where they stand, I guess. Whereas sometimes people can sugar, but sometimes it's like all right,
want the truth,
But sometimes you're like you could, you don't have to say it like that. So it's a balance.
It doesn't have to be the first thing you say too. It's like literally right when you walk through the door. It's like, oh, you can't wait. It's like,
thank you, love you too.
Nice to see you too. Yeah.
Oh man, I know that life.
Yeah, there's a Julie Mango video about that. So I will share that with you.
Okay, please do.
All right. So next culture question. Who is your favorite? It might be harder for Lebanese. I can't think of any Lebanese celebrities, but who is your favorite?
Oh, I can.
Jamaican celeb. Oh, I'm sure you can. I'm sure you can. So, but who is your favorite Lebanese celebrity? Who is your favorite Jamaican celebrity?
My favorite Lebanese celebrity is definitely, people don't know she's Lebanese because she's Lebanese kind of like I am, Shakira.
I know. I've heard. Shakira is Lebanese.
Yeah, she's Lebanese. Yeah, so she is probably like, as far as contemporary celebrities, she's definitely up there. The first person that comes to mind is Usain Bolt, which is I know it's such a cliche.
A tricky one too. I don't know.
It is a tricky one.
Since I came up with the question, I was thinking about this the other day, and I think obviously it's cliche, but Bob Marley. I mean, I've really grown to love his music. Yeah, and it's really deep, and I really grown to love his music like as I gotten older and everything. So Bob Marley #1, and I really love Shelly Ann Fraser Price, the runner. I don't know,
yes,
they call her like the pocket rocket. She's small, but she she's won like so many gold medals, and she's amazing.
True.
And she just like, if you ever see an interview with her, she's so like positive, and even on the track too. She's like, she always has her crazy hair, and she's like jumping up and down and like smiling at the camera, and so I just like her like vibe and energy, and I think that she grew up very poor and overcame a lot to get to where she is, and she just seems like a really down to earth and like just great person, very positive person. So I think she's
what
my
year
did
she win at the Olympics? Was it?
She won at the last Olympics.
It was at the last one, right? Okay,
and and several before then too.
Yeah. I think I remember being in Jamaica one summer when she won. Yeah, I think I remember that was a big deal. Yeah, no, that's a good one. I'm trying to think of maybe like actors, because I know like it's not difficult to think of Jamaican athletes,
right?
Especially when it comes to running. But I was trying to think where my mind immediately.
It can be a Jamaican American too,
right? That's I was also thinking. I was trying to think. I'm sure. Oh my god, I feel like I'm just drawing blank. But I was trying to think of
no, that's a hard one.
Actors
Another person, an actor is Cheryl Lee Ralph is Jamaican.
Oh, I didn't know
she's actually her family's from Mandeville, which is where our mother is from.
Oh, yes. Cool. I did not know
Yes. And so she's another one that I was like, she's cool too.
Yeah.
I love Cheryl Lee Ralph.
Oh, wow, okay.
I'm just giving you answers.
The reason I love Shakira so much for that reason is because it was interesting to see somebody who did not speak Arabic, who was not born in Lebanon, but who really found a way to be Lebanese in a way that was really kind of unapologetic. And I was like, okay, she's making Lebanese cool. Like she's, she found a way to really kind of make it hers, even though she didn't speak the language, even though she, wasn't from the region. So that always, my sisters and I always kind of admired that.
That's cool.
Yeah, I heard she when she had her Super Bowl performance, she did some kind of Lebanese.
Yeah, the throat, glottal thing that nobody sort of understood.
Right,
it's actually not the throat; it's actually with the tongue. The name of it escapes me, but it's like done to celebrate, and people had no idea what she was doing.
I know. I remember hearing about that.
Yeah.
Shakira has made the list twice now.
Yes, I was just that brings up. Yeah, I was just about to say that. We recently interviewed a Colombian guest. And,
that makes sense.
Yes, and so that was his first person as well. She was Shakira. So look at her crossing cultures as well.
Crossing borders.
Shakira, give us a call. We'd love to interview you for the show.
Yeah. So right now, Alex, we're on the Friends. As we're kind of embarking on this podcasting. Yeah. So we're like, okay, eventually we're going to run out of friends.
You'll find people. You'll find people.
I don't know.
It spreads word of mouth, and that's how it goes.
We'll see. We hope people like these conversations.
Oh, I'm sure they will.
We've really enjoyed.
Okay, just a few more questions.
Okay.
Just a few more little questions. All right. Do you have a happy place in each country, especially in Jamaica, since you visited so many times? Do you have a place that this is my happy place here?
Yeah. Ocho Rios for sure. That's where I would spend most of my summers. That my family, so my grandpa bought a house there, and that's definitely the happy place in Jamaica for sure. Yeah, that's where most of my memories are. Lebanon is harder. Because I've only been twice, I don't know that I've had a chance to kind of develop, a more kind of long-term attachment to it. But yeah, definitely Ocho Rios. I have very, very happy memories there. It feels like time stands still.
Time does go a lot slower there, I find, when I'm in Jamaica. It's kind of nice. It's nice.
Okay, and last culture question. What is something that you do in Jamaica or Lebanon that you would never do in the U.S.?
That's a good question. This question would have been way more effective, maybe 10 or 15 years ago. The first time I ever smoked weed was in Jamaica.
Oh my God.
I
love it. Yes. Love it.
Oh my
I was only 14 and I thought I was such a bad boy. I was like, oh my God, I'm breaking the law. And I was, that felt at the time like it was something, it's such a cliche response.
I was about to say, that's so stereotypical.
But also I don't really enjoy the beach. And in
Me
Jamaica,
either.
I do. Something about being on the beach in Jamaica feels different to me than like South Beach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I never go to the beach in the US. Never. The other, I'd say that's, and in Lebanon, I mean, the sheer amount that I eat in Lebanon is just not sustainable. I would way too much. Yeah, I guess just like the culture in Lebanon it's a night culture. So having dinner at 9-10 p.m., staying up very late, like that's not things I do here. And it's not something I would even enjoy doing here. But in Lebanon, it just feels right. It's sort of part of the fabric.
All right. So the last few things I want to talk about, or just the last thing I guess I want to talk about. So usually I will ask you to give us something that you dislike and then something that you love the most about your parents' culture. But I feel like we kind of touched on some of the negative aspects of each culture a little bit already. So I'm just going to ask you, what do you love the most about Lebanese culture and about Jamaican culture?
I really do love the island approach to life, which is sort of take it as it comes. And there's something very, a lot of people see that and they think that, no problem. And they sort of kind of belittle it. But to me, I've always heard that as kind of like a survival mechanism, that like this is how you survive. Like there is the only way to sustain a livable life is to live like that. Like if everything becomes a seismic problem, then even when it feels like it is, it's almost sometimes annoying how it's like, oh, it's not a big deal. Oh, it's fine. Oh, you're an hour late. It's okay. It's okay. But it does feel like a way to survive, and have, found a way to find a way to survive despite, any kind of precarity. So I do love that about, I could afford to include that in my life more than I currently do. Lebanon. What do I love about Lebanon? This is kind of a bit of a meta response. I love how much they love their culture. I really, really do. It's something that I think is so beautiful. I've seen it break hearts when people can't be with their culture the way that they once were. It's not a nationalistic thing. Like it's not a love for the country. It's a love for the culture, a love for the food, a love for the music, a love for the way of living that I haven't quite seen elsewhere. Like it really is. It's really admirable. I would love to be able to love a culture in the way that Lebanese people do typically their own. I mean, it's sort of beautiful to see.
On that note, I think we will wrap this up with Alex.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Alex, for being here. I'm just going to do a little podcast wrap up. So thank you again, Alex, for joining us today. I feel like I'm a very structured person, and this conversation got a little bit less structured, but I love that, actually. Like, it was really fun. It was really fun, and I really loved it. I really enjoyed getting to talk with someone who also understands Jamaican culture, which was really great. So, thank you, listeners, for joining us as well. Please tune in for future episodes, and we hope you all have a great week. Bye, everyone.